So thank you for having me for this book talk. I wish we could meet in person as we were supposed to in Miami. But here we are, and this is our new normal, at least for the next few weeks or month. But still, I think it's important that we meet and keep talking about the things we care about and try to advance those issues as best as possible. And what I will try to convey this message and what the bilingual revolutionists tried to convey via this Zoom talk. And I will share a few slides and examples of what the bilingual revolution has meant for certain communities here in New York, but also in other places in the US and also in other countries as this is spreading. Let me share the PowerPoint I have prepared, and also share the sound because I want to show a video. And well, I'm not starting with the conclusion, but with the first slides. There we go. So first of all, I want to say that I am first and foremost a parent of two young girls at home, and every day when they're at school, I take them to a French dual language program in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, where I live. And my wife and I are actually super happy that we can do that and give our daughters this type of education. It's a public school in Greenpoint. They go every day and learn in two languages. It's a dual language program, so French and English. And for us and for many other parents in our community, we are super excited to know that our daughters, our children, will be our children, in a sense that we know that by giving them this type of education, we're giving them more than just language. We're giving them a direct bond with us, with our roots and heritage, but also with our parents who are back in France. And this is what matters a lot. It has a lot to do with our identity and the identity of our children, particularly for children who are here and never visited or only visited their countries or home countries or their parents' home countries on a few trips or something like that. So for me, that's one angle that I want to introduce. But the other big question I asked myself in the book and in the talks that I give, in the people that I try to help, is how do we make sure that these languages that are spoken all around us, and how do we make sure that they are transmitted to our children, and is it enough to do this at home, and can we get schools to help in that task? And this is where this project started over 10 years ago, with the idea that if we could change the way schools are, and perhaps we could serve many more communities. But for that, we need to change completely, radically, the way education is offered. And a good friend of mine, Greg Roberts, says that there is a way we need to change the way monolingual is the norm. And then he says that monolingualism is the illiteracy of the 21st century. And I believe that in many ways, our education systems are definitely monolingual. And in the US, there are attempts at changing that, but in many other countries, it is still pretty much the case. And I come from a fairly monolingual country, France, which has still a long way to go before it can embrace the benefits of multilingualism. Over there, they call it plurilingualism. So for that, we need, to some extent, to create an environment that will at least accept and cherish the cultures and the linguistic diversities that's coming from our communities, from our families, particularly if they're newly arrived to our country. That needs to be promoted throughout societies, throughout schools, throughout cities, and we need to cherish this linguistic diversity. We need also to make sure that parents and school leaders and educators have a good and fruitful dialogue. And for that, and in many cases, that dialogue is not happening, and we need to make sure that there is a way to connect, particularly for newly arrived families approaching schools in particular with their needs. And then there's another aspect that is important, and that is about respect, respecting everyone, respecting others and our diversity. And that is something that needs to change. You still hear stories of people being harassed or insulted for speaking their language in a supermarket, for instance, or on the street, and that is no longer acceptable. That needs to stop. So there are a number of things that need to be done, including bridging those various gaps that I just mentioned. But I'm really focusing on a vision, because this is definitely although it may be difficult to think like that right now in our current situation, it is also about thinking how our future may look like. And this vision is about empowering families, empowering linguistic communities, and there are ways to do that through schools, through knowledge sharing, and a lot of advocacy. And I'll tell you a little bit more how this concretely can happen. But at least this is an approach for this century, and we can together advance those societies, make sure that through our collective effort, this multilingual approach has a positive impact on our societies. The more we invest in our linguistic heritage, the more we raise our new multilingual citizens of the world, then I think we can definitely have an impact on schools, have an impact on the teaching profession as well. And that vision places parents at the center of change. Parents can definitely have an impact and have power to change the educational landscape that they evolve in. And I will show you examples of parents who actually did that. And in the book, I talk more about this. But this idea of a revolution started with Professor Ophelia Garcia, whom I call the mama of bilingual education in the United States, because she says that there is something we need to pay attention to, is that bilingual education is a return of power to ethno-linguistic communities. And by return of power, we need to be very aware of that aspect, and that power is also to encourage their desire, these communities' desire, to instruct and to have their children instructed bilingually. So for Ophelia Garcia, bilingual education, in the sense of the bilingual revolution, it takes a U-turn. And again, a U-turn is a revolution. It turns around, and it turns around to a place where this is what families wanted at the beginning. And for Ophelia, perhaps in the United States in particular, bilingual education lost itself along the way and became over political and and redefined and repackaged by school systems, so that it's no longer really listening to the needs of the families, at least how it was first conceived in the 1970s in particular in this country. So we need to pay attention to the communities and the parents' wishes to educate their children into languages. So with that in mind, it's also important to explain what bilingual education means. And for many families, it's about access to English and the equal opportunities that are connected to speaking English. But for others, like my family, it's definitely about sustaining our linguistic heritage and making sure that our children remain our children and can connect with our parents on Sundays through Skype or Zoom, or send them postcards in French, in our case, for Christmas and so forth. This is definitely another aspect of bilingual education. For many families, more and more, you hear about the cognitive advantages of growing into languages. And many monolingual mainstream, I would say, families in this country are starting to understand the benefits of bilingualism, and are willing to invest in this type of education. Now, families with money can pay for private schools, and many private schools provide this type of bilingual education for a price. And the idea here, of course, is to see if we can generalize it and offer quality bilingual programs throughout public school systems. Now, the last piece, many families and actually school authorities and even governments believe more and more in the professional opportunities that growing bilingual will trigger. This is something that I hear a lot in France, for instance, where slowly but surely people are willing to imagine bilingual schools because of that business professional connection that it provides. So ultimately, these different visions provide or share the same goal, which is to create this multilingual society with more access to programs and bilingual programs or dual language programs or language education in general, and cultures as well. Now, it's important to also explain that what bilingual is not, because I keep hearing that there are confusions about, well, being bilingual is a handicap, it will slow down my child's verbal or development, or even my child's IQ. It's all wrong. It's something that needs to be said and repeated, particularly to parents, but also to educators. It is not a handicap to be bilingual. It does not hurt your IQ. It's not superfluous. It's not a privilege. It's something that does not require $30,000 a year throughout your entire schooling. And it's definitely not a taboo if you're an immigrant to speak your language or trans language or a mix of languages. This is also something, and I'm thinking about France and Arabic speakers in France, but I'm sure Arabic speakers in the US can also relate, or other languages. But we shouldn't be afraid of speaking our tongues, and that means that parents should not be afraid of transmitting their linguistic heritage to their children. And I know here there are many examples of families who chose not to do that, to protect their children from being discriminated against, and that needs to be changed. And I'll show how this has been done. But for me, being bilingual is definitely the new norm, and that new norm would be started in schools with the youngest of our citizens. And and I believe it can happen. So this is not a new idea, because it started over 30 years ago in several communities. And the example that I'm showing is from a school in Brooklyn. There's two lovely ladies at the center are running this school, the Cypress Hill School. There's a school principal and the other is a parent, and both of them are co-directors of that school, which has been a Spanish dual language program for over 30 years, and they have started this revolution, before everybody else. And for them, it's definitely serving a community, maintaining two languages at a strong academic level, and definitely ensuring that the success of their children. So this is an example that I found very inspiring, and I went out and looked for similar type of examples in other communities, and stories that then helped shape not only my book, but also the roadmap that I present to parents. I often talk about sad stories, if you'd like, although they're not. There's always a bright side to it. But the Russian dual language program that was started 13 years ago in Brooklyn was done through a lot of hardship, and actually the founding parent, who's here on the left, you see probably next to me, Maria Kot. She had to sue the Department of Education to get our Russian dual language program started. She had the numbers of families interested. She had the reasons. A lot of the children she was serving needed the program, either because they were English language learners or they were families wanting to retain this education. And then she fought and won. And now the program is still there and thriving, and has inspired other communities, such as this one in the Upper West Side, to create similar programs. But Maria says you don't have to go this way. You don't have to create like a legal team to get those programs started. It could be done. It can be done constructively with school authorities. And this is another example from the Arabic dual language program in Brooklyn again. And the story goes that before this program was started, there was another attempt called the Khalil Gibran School. And I remember it vividly because at the same time I was opening the first French dual language program in Brooklyn, and we were getting the New York Times and a lot of fantastic press saying, "Wow, wonderful! We're starting the first French dual language program." At the same time, the Arabic dual language program at the Khalil Gibran School was started, but they were not getting the New York Times. They were getting the New York Post, and a lot of people saying, "Well, this is unacceptable. We are creating a madrasa," and you had people protesting with placards outside the school saying, "Stop the madrasa, stop the madrasa." And unfortunately for that school, it was terminated, and the DOE decided to terminate it. But fortunately, again, there's always a bright side to those stories. This school, the CIES 30, was started and left all the politics outside of the school. It was just going to provide dual language education for children who come from Arabic-speaking backgrounds or not. Many other families are choosing that school to learn Arabic, or for their children to learn Arabic. But this for me is a very interesting story. And again, relating this with France and the fact that we have over 5 million Arabic speakers who are not really Arabic speakers anymore in France, but no Arabic dual language program. This is where I hope one day, through this type of work, we can bring similar positive experiences to my home country. I want to pause and show you a video of a Japanese dual language programs. And the women here that you see came to visit me almost 10 years ago, and then they wanted to create, New York's first Japanese dual language program in a public school. And we sat down and looked at the roadmap and figured out a strategy. And they were so efficient that within 6 months, they created this school. So let me show you this video, and I hope the sound will work.
We are the only school in the entire Department of Education that hosts the first Japanese dual language program. The children are learning Japanese and English through all of the subjects.
アメリカ人の先生のコーティーチャーと、あと日本人の先生が2人体制で、だいたい半分が日本語で、半分が英語で勉強してます。日本語のバックグラウンドがある子どもたちと、そうじゃない子たちが一緒のクラスで学習しています。
I believe in the power of bilingualism. When children are proficient in 2 languages, their cognitive development is at a much higher level.
Bilingual students have better results in math than monolingual students on those standardized tests. That's been proven by a number of studies. Being bilingual is not just about languages, it's so much more.
クリエイティビティ、答えがないものに対してそれを答えを導き出す力っていうのがすごくあるなっていうふうに感じます。
You're tapping into different parts of the brain as you're speaking 2 languages. So your brain is more active.
Starting in kindergarten and pre-K is a great age for children to start to learn a second language.
It actually sinks into your brain much more, and it's much more natural.
毎日日本語に触れているっていうのはすごく大きいと思います。すごい勢いで習得してます。英語が遅れていることも全然なくて、学ぶことをすごく楽しく感じてるみたいです。
When you really think about it, it is a specialized program. The students do exceptionally well.
違った言語を学ぶことで、世界の違う国とか文化とか考え方、やっぱりいろんなことを考えさせるきっかけになると思うんですよ。
It really opens your mind to the world outside. And it doesn't just open your mind, but it opens your heart.
They show greater empathy, respect culture, respect others, and generate tolerance and greater understanding for others.
She has the opportunity to see the world through many different eyes.
日本語が自分ができるっていうことがすごく嬉しい。誇りに思えているように思います。
これからの世の中を良くしていける子どもたちを育てることができるんじゃないかなっていうふうに私は思ってます。もっと面白く、もっと楽しく、もっと意味があるようなカリキュラムになるようにっていうのは常にチャレンジしながらやってます。やっぱ子どもたちが日本語が好きって言ってくれるのがすごく嬉しいです。すごい私やっててよかったなっていうふうに思います。
Through this JDLP program, I personally have gained a lot of very close friends.
2015年に保護者の熱い声でできたプログラムです。
Parents are our partners.
I feed off their energy.
Because it's so grassroots, parents have to be involved. And in that way, families do come together. When the children see that the parents are building a community, they build their own community as well. They're like brothers and sisters.
子育てっていうのは学校だけじゃなくて家庭とコミュニティとみんなが集まってやることでより素晴らしいものができると思うんですね。でそれの理想形が今17であるんじゃないかなっていうふうに感じます。
To see them thrive in this program, it just floors me. It makes me so happy.
この子たちが日本とアメリカで世界をつなぐ架け橋になってくれたら嬉しいです。
I can't think of a better way of teaching our children.
So I hope this sound went okay with you. The anecdote about this program is that the First Lady of Japan visited the school. This school is in Bushwick, Brooklyn. So I don't know if you're familiar with Bushwick, Brooklyn. It's not Japanese. It's predominantly Puerto Rican, and the principal you met there, Sandy Noyola, she's not Japanese. She's from Puerto Rico. But then she saw an opportunity. She met with these parents, and she knew it was going to be helpful, not just for the Japanese speakers, but also for the Spanish speakers. They would become trilingual. And the fact that the Japan's First Lady visited the school and even actually donated $30,000 to the school, it's an unreal. But it can happen, and these programs do that. These programs connect people in many, many ways. They're more than just language. Now, the example that I show you here, the High School for Dual Language and Asian Studies, is also important because it shows that these programs can go all the way to high school. You can create a continuum and serve students throughout their schooling with actually very competitive settings. This is a public school which is ranked among the best high schools in the United States, and it started out, as a simple idea, but which was difficult to put together. But this principal here fought and convinced many parents to join this initiative, and now this school has been thriving for years. There are plenty of examples. This is an example that I recently witnessed with the French-speaking communities. We were able to convince the Department of Education to create a pre-K program in French in the Upper East Side and District 2. So it's a larger part of Manhattan, but this program will be launched in September if the budget cuts are letting us do that. But the idea is that we can do more of these programs if we get everyone involved. In this particular example, there were council members who saw the benefits and met with the parents, and the parents came from all walks of lives, all different nationalities were there in the room. And the one thing I want to say about the French is that, in particular in New York, is that if you count the number of children who speak French or live in homes where French is spoken, then there's room to open 50 more schools like that. And in particular in areas very underserved and with communities that could benefit the most from these programs. And I'm thinking in the Bronx in particular, where there are a lot of families from West Africa, and we're trying to figure out a way to create more programs for them in the Bronx. There are other communities that have been trying to create similar programs. The Germans were successful in launching the first German language program in a school in Brooklyn. The Korean families that I met were also trying to create a Korean English dual language program. and they will succeed. The Greek families in Astoria have tried for years and years and years, and although they have thousands of parents following them on Facebook and other social media, they still haven't been able to convince the school authorities about creating a Greek English dual language program. But they're not giving up. They'll keep on fighting until they succeed. Polish dual language education has grown in the last few years, and I live in Greenpoint, so right across my apartment there's a school, PS 34, which has a very successful Polish dual language program, and many educators and community leaders are now trying to replicate that. There are already a lot of Polish dual language programs in the Chicago area, but here in New York, it took a while to come out, but that's now growing fast. Now, the Italian example I want to show you is the last video that I will show, and then it's important to understand. I mean, if you know about the Italians of New York and you've watched all the movies like I did, and you wonder why there were not more Italian dual language programs in a city like New York, with even a mayor claims to, speak Italian or come from an Italian family, or even a governor. So you wonder what's happening here and why are they not creating more Italian dual language programs? And then a few families got together a few years ago and went to the Italian consulate and decided that they wanted to change that and create Italian programs. And here's a video that they put together to rally as many parents as possible behind their cause.
I have 3 kids, and I started speaking Italian to my kids from day one, and it's been working okay until they started going to school. That's where I understood that it was really important to find a school that had Italian, and we could find none.
The project was started by 2 families and has managed to reach many more in all the boroughs. What I was hearing was, if there is no demand, it means there are no Italians, they want to learn Italian. So it's been quite important for us to show everybody, no, hey, guess what, we're here.
We managed to convince the Department of Education to create an Italian dual language program in Manhattan, but we don't want to stop here. There's a lot of families in other boroughs, and it would be awesome if they could create the same opportunity in different boroughs.
What's interesting about this possibility of an Italian school in New York is that 50% would be Italian kids, and the rest would be kids whose language is not Italian. So this whole exchange of diversity of thought is something that we are really missing in this world, and to be able to offer that in a public school environment in New York City would be just possibly for me a dream come true.
It's really important to me to find a good school community. Cultures, multicultural, multiracial. We want her to be in an environment where both sides of our own identity kind of recognize and met.
For us, it's extremely important that he has a bilingual education, because it's a way to make him hopefully a better citizen of the world.
Join the bilingual revolution.
So this is another example, and I didn't tell these families to go on with this video. They went on themselves, and then they really used their talent and skills, and were able to to engage a number of families, and they were successful in creating a program in Brooklyn and Bensonhurst, which is the old Italian bastion. And a lot of Italian American families actually have embraced this initiative and put their kids in the program. But then there's another program that was started in Harlem recently, and it's interesting to see this is growing. This slide is about the center that I founded with a few other educators, and we thought that we need to expand this and create this nonprofit to serve as many communities as possible in the U.S., but then ultimately outside as well. I'll say why, because a lot of the work that we do is now translated and available in many languages, and then therefore this is now being used in other countries. So we are showing examples of New York, like I'm doing right now, and how New York is like the backdrop of this revolution. But yet again, New York being the world, it's also inspiring communities outside of the US, and that's what I like to see. So not only through workshops and presentations, and Zoom is helping us even go further than that, but then what we're doing is coaching parents and families to follow this roadmap, which was created by other parents. It's a lessons learned type of approach, and it goes in 3 steps. You know, first, how do you create a base of interest in families? Where do you find them? Do you have to? How do you approach them? Where do you also use the local media or talk to community leaders or churches and mosques and temples? Where do you connect with all these families and families with young children? And the second stage is developing this rationale for convincing a school principal or a school board or a superintendent. And this is also an important step, as parents need to be educated somehow into creating this type of language and collecting data and showing it to school leaders. And then finally, the third stage is about supporting a school. What do you do now that the school has been accepted your idea? How do you keep on helping that school, and how do you keep on helping the school find teachers, particularly if the school principal does not speak the language? How do you find materials and resources and so forth? So this is another stage of the roadmap. But we provide testimonials. We record the parents who were successful in creating those programs, and then also the principals that are running those schools. And of course, and some of you have already had access to the book, but we also publish books, not just mine, but other researchers' books, and also people who have an interesting take on sustaining one's language and one's linguistic heritage. And the books are translated and then made available. Most of them are distributed to communities for free, particularly the ebooks, like I just did with for this workshop. So this is another way of trying to advance these ideas and you know, creating and joining this bilingual revolution. So this is how I want to end this talk and listen to your comments and questions. But I believe that this can be a dual language education for all. That's the main driver. It has to be for all. Not only it is an equitable model, inclusive of all, particularly if you imagine this in a public school setting. And it's about empowering our families. It's about empowering our linguistic communities. Definitely, it's more than just language. And I'll repeat myself, but it's about understanding who we are, where we come from, and sharing that with our children, but also telling others that we are together and we respect our diversity. These are great ways to connect with relatives, with friends and others, and our children have these fruitful connections. And then ultimately, and when I think again at the Arabic dual language program, these are ways to create greater understanding, respect, tolerance and peace. Ultimately, it's about peace, because those two communities, the two groups of children, are symbolic of peacemakers trying to understand each other and respecting each other. So this is what we can do together, and I'm happy to answer your questions for now. And I'll stop the PowerPoint, but this is how you can also contact me.
All right. Thank you so much.
Does it sound okay? I'm always worried about the sound.
The sound worked great.
Even with the videos?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
So
it's hard for me to tell because I don't see what goes on with her. But I'm glad it worked out.
So I want to open it up. I've got lots of questions, but also wanted to open up to everyone who's been able to join us to see if any of you have questions first. As I mentioned in the chat room, either you can include your questions there or you can just ask them directly if you've got working audio. Does anyone have a question they want to raise and kick things off? Okay, I've got a question in here from Liliana Smith. Thank you. She says that she's read your very inspiring book, and she's really interested in how to keep the interest in the dual language programs and ways to secure funding, if you could respond to that.
So to keep the interest in...
Keep the interest in the programs and how to secure funding.
Okay. Well, usually when I talk to parents, and when the parents are invested with this mission and put pressure on the school, then they are so engaged that they are going to be securing that interest, at least on behalf of the parents, but then there will also be constant reminders to the school principals and school authorities that this needs to be developed and built and so forth. A lot of these parents will actually start raising funds for communities that can do that, or writing grants, or supporting the school principals into many opportunities, such as writing grants and approaching businesses and getting donations. I heard stories of schools getting computer donations and so forth. So there is interest in making sure this is done together, that it takes a village to build a dual language program, and that there are ways of also attracting supplemental funding from various sources. I've seen this in many ways, particularly in New York, where you have all these consulates and community organizations that are pitching in and providing some funding or some books or training opportunities for the teachers, or scholarships and so forth. So I think this is a win-win situation, and this is something that I tell parents to think about when they're on stage 2, which is about developing a rationale to convince a school principal. This is not going to fall on the principal's lap. This is going to be a joint effort, and this is where they're winning their case, and they're saying these things and proving by showing the number of partners or people showing interest for their initiative. So that's how I've seen it. That's the next question.
Great. Thank you. There's a question that's coming in from Carol Benson about the many languages of the families. Would you like me to ask it, Carol, or do you want to ask?
Go ahead.
I can say something. And I also wanted to just tell you, Fabrice, did you see that Valerie has joined us? But
she was?
Carol Benson, but she's joining us from France. At the last minute, I sent her my link.
Oh, hi. Bonjour.
My question was about and I'm sorry I haven't read your book yet, so you may touch on this in the book, but do you talk about the people from so-called Francophone communities, but they're really from Senegal or Haiti, and they speak other home languages, and how can we make dual language programs more inclusive of the home languages of those of people from those communities?
Yeah, so there are a number of programs that do exist in Creole, and have existed for a long time in Creole. And then for a discussion that I have had with the Haitian community, we were trying to imagine trilingual programs where there would be French, English, and Creole. Now, this has not materialized in New York City public schools, but it is very possible to organize these types of settings. I see there's one example that I have in mind. My daughters go to this French-English dual-language program, and they have Italian in the afternoon, 2 hours a week, because the school has this program. Well, why not? Why not imagine trilingual programs with using these opportunities? So this is very possible. It's the same thing with the Malians and Bambara or Wolof. It can be done. And the other piece, and that's, Carol, this is really for you, because I was in Dakar and I met your colleagues at the University Cheikh Anta Diop, and they were responding to my book and my ideas for the Senegalese context, and the fact that children are raised in so many national languages, and then when it's time to go to school, all of a sudden it's going to be done in French, and forget the rest, forget what you've learned at home. It's French from now on. So how they're trying to think of ways of creating dual language programs there to nurture the home language as well as learning French or other international languages, but so that the children are not, delayed or that they're not suffering from not developing those skills within their own home language. So that's interesting to see it. Also from their angle, and see how these ideas can be brought back to their Senegal or Mali or other places, and help provide solutions for their national context. So for me, not only trilingualism is possible here, and trilingual education is possible here, but it's also interesting to see that New York City and the examples here of the diaspora can influence home countries like Senegal or others.
And vice versa, right? Because I think that we're in multilingual context, we're talking about multilingual education for all. And I know that's a hard sell, but when you said dual language education for all, I said, oh, we have to get these efforts together, because I think the Global South can talk to us a lot about how to use and maximize multiple languages.
Yeah, and many countries are now realizing that. There was another example when I went to give a talk in the Emirates, and I never thought, my book is translated in Arabic, but I never thought it would respond so well over there. But they came, and the parents in the room said, well, for us, we are worried. We are worried because our children don't want to speak Arabic to us anymore. They have access to English, and then the Emirates is a society with a lot of English speakers, or English is everywhere. And the children, because they go to international schools, they just decide not to speak Arabic to their parents. They choose to speak English, and the parents are very worried about that. And that's also interesting to see that no one has thought about dual language education the same way, or at least the way I was discussing it, and perceive this as a solution. If you teach those two languages, or within those two languages, on an equal footing and at the same time, perhaps this would provide a solution against children refusing to speak their parents' tongues. But these are different contexts, different solutions are needed. Same thing with French, different solutions are needed for the French context. Obviously, It will take time. It will take a lot of talking, and then also the politics has to be set aside in order to think clearly. And there was a recent attempt from one of our former culture minister, Jack Lang, who wrote this book about the Arabic language being a treasure of France, that a language that belongs to the patrimoine français, the story of France. And I thought, well, this is very courageous, also very dangerous, because he's been attacked many, many times because of that way. But I like the fact that there are people like that taking these risks, trying to change these conceptions. Sorry, I get carried away. What are the other questions?
I don't see any questions right now in the chat room, so maybe I'll jump in with a question I have that's connected with the expansion of dual language programming, both at the upper levels and then the lowest levels. So what I really appreciate about your perspective is obviously your commitment to equitable access. And I love one of your final sentences in the book, this is on page 120, is very clear, right? There should be no question. A bilingual education should be available to every child in the United States and around the world, which is this kind of radical idea for many, but I think particularly at some of the lowest levels. And so I wanted to ask you about your reflections and ideas about the expansion of dual language at the pre-K level. I know last year, Mayor de Blasio in New York rolled out dual language programming in New York City at the pre-K level as the pre-K was expanding as well. Do you think that this level offers particular opportunities or particular challenges when we think about the development of dual language programming?
For me, it was essential that in New York City that it was happening in pre-K, because I experienced it with my children. They went to pre-K in English because there was no other option. And many students, many families go through the same experience. But what happens, it's like a sink or swim situation that we are trying to avoid by creating those programs. But why were they not available in pre-K, which is the first here in New York? It's the first year of public education, public schooling. Now, you can start even earlier, and I hear more and more programs will open for 3-year-olds, and why not do them in dual language settings? It already happens in many schools around the world, and it already happens in private schools anyway. Why not think it through and offer it in public schools? So for me, it's a great move. I was thrilled to see it, and if we are actually moving into adding the three pre-Ks, why not think about dual language 3 pre-Ks as well? The earlier we start, the better, really, to be frank.
Okay, right, yeah. I guess at least in the US context, the idea of public pre-K is a revolution in and of itself, where it isn't so much in some other countries in the world. Thank you. There's a question coming in from Carol also about the Seal of Biliteracy, and if you could talk a little bit about the Seal of Biliteracy.
Yeah, so I've been following the Seal of Biliteracy for a while now, and I've been encouraging students, particularly in the program run by the French Embassy called the French Heritage Language Program. So we've been working with the schools to try to see if more students from a Francophone background could take these, it's not an exam, it's more like a series of steps towards getting the Seal of Biliteracy. I think it's a great way to validate and recognize this education that you have received through. For me, it's almost as if we should do more. And I've worked with a couple of schools that have started their IB program, the International Baccalaureate programs. And again, these are public schools again. And the fact that the International Baccalaureate program is also available as a bilingual international baccalaureate program, I thought, well, gee, this is a great idea, because think again, the IB program is internationally, it's for globally minded people. And the fact that all your life you've been, and all your families in that mindset, the fact that even if you're an immigrant and recently arrived, you're still thinking globally. Why not, use that pedagogy and try to add the dual language component to it and make sure that our students graduate with a bilingual international baccalaureate in a public school, which would then therefore be recognized by universities and so forth. And I think this is taking a step further than the seal of biliteracy. And it's also, and a number of projects that I'm working on right now are trying to integrate the IB into dual language middle schools and high schools as well. So there are, it's actually a great news to talk about this. It would be a shame not to talk about those new ideas. And it's great to see that there are so many more options now with the seal, which is expanding throughout the US, and with the IB and other programs. So the more we do this, I think the better it is for our children. And hopefully universities will start evolving a little bit as well in terms of creating bilingual programs or dual language programs that would continue this type of education. That's another discussion to have. Go ahead.
Great. Megan has a question about locating bilingual schools that already exist around her, that it's been really challenging to even locate these. There used to be a database of dual language bilingual schools, but the last time she checked, it wasn't being updated. She's wondering, is there any kind of national network of schools with multilingual education programs, maybe even international? And then how do parents find out what's even available in their area?
Megan, are you located in New York? Where are you located? Sorry.
Hi, I'm located in Dallas, Texas. So I know there are a number of English bilingual schools and probably some other ones, although I'm primarily interested in Spanish.
Yeah. So there's not that many resources out there, and there's a few initiatives such as the dual language schools.org website. They're trying to gather as many information as possible on the schools. There used to be like a listing at the Center for Applied Linguistics, but it's not up to date. I don't think it's been kept up to date. But usually, sometimes for states that are really engaged in dual language education, it's easier to find. And I will ask you like a little quiz question. Is and you'll see the first one to answer this one. Which state in the US is the #1, is the leader of dual language education? According to which state? Any wild guess? Anyone?
Is it New York?
Not New York.
California?
Utah?
I heard it. I heard it.
Liliana is saying Utah.
Good job. Congrats. It's Utah. Utah, yeah. Utah is the #1. It's the leading state and for the last 10 years, they've created hundreds and hundreds of dual language programs on an industrial scale, basically. And you find them in Spanish, in Chinese, in French, in Russian, some in German, and other languages. And over there, it's not done the same way as I've described. It's not a bottom-up approach. It's more like a top-down. It came from the governor's decision to create a competitive workforce, basically. I think people in Utah thought about it and really thought that if they were not doing something with their students, their children, then the economy would collapse. At least now they're thinking that being multilingual gives you more opportunities and you're more competitive on a global market, and therefore, and of course people will say, well, it's also because of the Mormons and they have another motivation, but it's not just that. It's not just that. But it's interesting. And on the website, on their website, you'll find not only the listing of all the schools, but all the resources. Now they're sharing their resources with the world, basically. So that's. But it's hard to locate. There's no centralized system in place with a full up-to-date listing. I'm trying to do it for French, and I think we've counted over 190 schools in the US in 33 states and 88 cities. But it's taking forever to get this type of data.
Great, thanks. We've got a question in from Kevin Wong, who was former Language Issues SIG co-chair with Carol.
Hi, Kevin.
You probably know each other. He is wondering how you respond to a question that's often asked about what teachers should do in dual language programs when first there are multiple language represented, back to Carol's earlier point and question, and then second, when the teacher does not speak the language of the children. So he recognizes that there isn't a perfect answer to the question, but would love to hear how you respond to these scenarios.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. What teachers should do in dual language program where there are multiple language represented in the classroom, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's true, and I see it in my daughter's classrooms. You have children who come here, they come with 2, 3, sometimes 4 languages, and parents actually are pushing for that, and then they're seizing the opportunities. They're not necessarily connecting to the linguistic heritage aspect. They're definitely going for something else, which is growing. I think it's just being trilingual or quadrilingual. Now, for teachers, how do you respond to such a classroom? I think by respecting everyone's linguistic background, and there's many ways to do that. And I'm thinking, since we mentioned Christine Hello, there was an experience in Alsace where families from different communities came to school to present their language and teach a few words about their language, and also share a song or something from their kitchen. So that there was an interesting way of embracing this linguistic diversity, and it can be done. It can be done too in dual language settings. Actually, this should be the case all the time, I think. And there was another thing that we are working on with a dual language high school in Brooklyn is, why don't we create an international festival or an international language festival where all the students in the school would showcase their language, so that we all see it, hear it, and experience it. So this is what I would recommend to teachers. It's an opportunity, and we should celebrate that diversity. And then the second question, if the teacher does not speak the language of the children, Valérie, you might know more about this than I do, but I think many of my daughter's teachers don't speak French as native speakers, and they've always felt quite, complex. And sometimes they actually have to deal with complex parents. And I think we need to educate the parents as well, in the sense that it's okay to make spelling mistakes. It's okay to, if you're a teacher, it's okay to have an accent. Again, focusing on tolerance, understanding, and that we are not perfectionists. And I think we can still create valuable learning like that. The other reason I'm saying this is it's so hard to find teachers that are certified, qualified, that don't have paper problems with immigration, that you're not going to find the perfect two-language teacher who's perfect in two languages and super good at teaching. I mean, yes, they do exist, but if you're developing these programs on a large scale, you have to figure out and accept different types of teachers, different skills and language levels. I think for me, I don't see it as a problem if we are smart and respectful of others, and it can still work. I mean, for me, my daughter's teachers, I remember in the 3rd grade, she has a strong accent, but she was a brilliant musician. And she played the guitar with the kids and made them sing and enjoy learning languages through songs. And I thought, well, I mean, I don't want my kids to learn the verbs or the vocabularies just, by rote. I want them to enjoy and appreciate the emotion of learning. And I thought, well, you gain, you lose, but everyone brings skills and passion. So that's what I would.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I know it's a very complex and multifaceted issue. So.
Yeah. All right.
So Carol is chiming in with another concern issue about how you respond to the critique that dual language programs help mainstream kids from monolingual English homes more than speakers of non-dominant languages.
Yeah. But you hear, let me see, I'll read it again. You hear a lot of, and more here in New York, actually, you hear these talks about the white privilege and the fact that people are seeing dual language programs as next to the gifted and talented program, and therefore they're queuing to join in and sign up into these programs, but that is detrimental to other children. And I don't buy it. I think it's used politically against dual language education more than it is actually the case, particularly in New York City. Now, maybe in other places, it's what's happening, and that affluent families are being served more than they should, or something like that. But I don't see it, and I think principals and school leaders should be very careful about this and not create bubbles within those programs. And the principal I work with are always mindful of that. They really want to make sure that their programs are equitable and serving everyone, and definitely supporting the needs of all children. So it's hard to get a clear answer on this question, but we need to remind ourselves. You're right, Carol, to ask. We need to remind ourselves all the time: are we creating programs that will serve one group more than another? Again, I think it's better to have those programs than not to have those programs. That's something that would be terrible if we were to go back to a monolingual system. So I don't think we should be afraid of having these types of reactions right now. When you consider countries that don't have anything like that and that are far from getting those programs, I think we are fortunate to have those programs, and we make sure that they serve as many people as possible. Yeah, that's how I want to respond to your question, Carol. I think it's a good point. You hear it drives me nuts because it breaks my heart to know that it may happen, but also it cannot be an excuse for not creating those programs, and that's sometimes, unfortunately, that's what I think it is. People are just accusing those programs of being, serving white privilege or privilege to the, and I don't think, I think it should be, it definitely should not be that, and it can do more than that. It's actually, I think it could bridge those gaps more. It is a great tool to put communities in the same classroom and build that bridge. So.
Great, we've got another question in from Monica Herrera about the role of parents over the life of the dual language programs. So she's asking about the necessity of parents supporting already existing programs. She's saying here that she believes the parent's role does not end at the initial level, but that there's the need for constant support of already existing programs in terms of fundraising and collaboration, and wonders what you have to say about that.
Yeah, it's true. I've always found it's even a personal fight, is that the people who create the programs, with the founding parents, will carry that program through all the way to, particularly if you start in pre-K and then go all the way through 5th grade and on after. Those are the most dedicated and most motivated parents. And those that arrive after them, they take it for granted sometimes that those programs exist. And then their expectations are at another level or a different place. Now, it doesn't mean that you still find people willing to contribute and help and fundraise and support. And there's always those parents, and that's wonderful. But it's true that they're different from the founding parents who went through. They were the guinea pigs to some extent, and they were the builders, and their metals were tested, and then they went through the extra mile to get the programs developed. So what I've done in the past, every September, at least in a couple of schools I've worked with, is that I've had those meetings where I've spoken at parents, the founding parents, explain what they went through, just so that people hear and then understand that they're given a gift, that they should be supporting and cherishing that gift. This program is here because people before them fought for them, and that needs to be said and repeated sometimes. Is that, Monica? I hope I'm answering the question right, Monica.
Yes. Does anyone else have a question? While you're thinking, that I do want to ask for you to do a bit of forecasting, if you would, and it's not to cast any kind of shadows on what's about to happen, but I wonder and worry about the bilingual revolution meeting the impending recession that we're going into. And I wonder what you imagine coming in the next year or two, when inevitably, especially our public education sector, is going to be faced with tremendous cuts. What do you foresee happening in places like New York City, but also beyond, with dual language?
Yeah, no, there's a bump in the road, and that's for sure. I mean, I saw the Mayor de Blasio's budget cuts this morning. A lot of things will disappear, and I'm sure they'll come back after a while. But it's going to be, again, it's going to be up to the parents, to my mind, to fight for that. I think, programs are created or survive because parents put their extra energy into them. So I can see that we're going to face a lot of difficulties, and if people have to decide whether it's going to be math or STEM or arts or the dual language education program, then we need to make sure, at least parents need to make sure that their voices are heard, and that that it's not done behind their back, and that they will fight for that. Right? There's a lot of things that I've seen from, in situations where it's the voices of many parents that prevailed, and people budget cutters are always mindful of that as well as how much. So it's hard. It's a hard question. It's a hard question. I don't think this will keep on growing. This is not going to. Actually, I think going to go through this even stronger, because people are now paying more attention to their families and their elders, and there's something about being locked down basically that makes us pay attention to those simple but yet essential values, where we are from and what we do with our children and what we want for their future.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's such a beautiful bridge to this next question that's coming in from Liliana about the best ways to support families who are already part of the dual language programs during this time of the COVID-19, so that the families don't lose the enthusiasm given the reduced exposure that the kids are having to the partner language in particular.
It's a great question. It's actually, I'm thinking we should organize another webinar about this and invite people who could share those ideas. My wife actually told me, why don't you do this webinar and invite your friends to tell us how to do these things. And I think that perhaps it's something we could do together with this SIG, is just to offer solutions. Like I have a few ideas, and I know a few colleagues of mine are sharing their ideas as well. So why don't we try this and organize something on that topic and share ideas for these parents? I mean, all of us together, I'm sure we can come up with great tips. I see teachers are getting organized as well, because they have to face the impossible task of becoming online teachers with little children. I see my younger ones, our teachers are just, I don't know, it's too much. They can't, I mean, they're trying to imagine what it's like. So doing something similar, a workshop for teachers, is another thing to consider. So yeah, I don't have it right away to deliver to you, but it's something I'm thinking about, and perhaps we could do this together.
Yeah, that's a great idea for collaboration and timely, so we can work towards even greater relevance. Thank you. And thanks for that question. Perhaps we're nearing the end. The final question, unless someone wants to sneak in after this one, also comes from Monica Herrera. And this is about teachers, and she apologizes because she was disconnected for a bit when the other teacher question came in. But she's asking, she knows that finding appropriately certified, or at least the average teacher, is hard, especially as these new programs are created. So what suggestions do you have to address this issue of identifying teachers?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So there's a number of things. My other hat is that I work for the French embassy. So trying to find teachers for these programs has been on our plate since day one. And there are a number of things with creating those international partnerships, which can definitely help. Many states in the US have opened their door to collaborations with other countries, and I know for France, we've signed many memorandum of understanding with a number of states. Now, not New York, unfortunately, and although I've tried, but there are plenty of other states who have understood the value of international cooperation, and in particular for teacher exchange and teacher development. And I think that's a good way of approaching it, because we can gain from that, and school systems worldwide can gain from that. There's not enough of that, at least in New York. I don't see anybody talk about doing these kinds of teacher exchange and international collaboration, unfortunately. But I hear in Utah or North Carolina or even Louisiana and many other states, that's what's helping find teachers. The other thing we've done in New York is collaborate with universities, and we've created incentive programs and scholarship programs through fundraising this time. So we brought the money, but then the university brought the master's program and the infrastructure, and that way we were able to attract teachers or students actually to the teaching profession with some incentive, and that was one way of solving this urgent need. Now we need to do more of that, because it's growing and growing and growing, and have a more systematic approach to this. And I think Utah has developed a more systematic approach, which includes international collaboration, but also on-site training and growing new teachers, and also make sure that teachers are not getting burnt out after 5 years of doing this, which is what I've seen, is that being a dual language teacher is exhausting, and therefore there's a lot of reinventing the wheel, particularly if you're not getting the proper support, and that makes ultimately makes people give up after a while or move on to something else, which hurts this type of programming. So there are a number of solutions out there, and it can be done with many countries. I know the Italians are doing this right now, and the consulate of Italy is very engaged in the Italian dual language program. And then you see the Mexican embassy and the Cervantes for Spain are also trying to get active, and then other countries are now on board. So, this is how I would solve this, creating some kind of international collaboration. And if you can't, for whatever political or immigration issues, then nurturing those teachers from where you are.
Thank you. We're at 1:30, so I don't want to overextend you and don't want to overextend those who've joined us. I did want to, though, create a little window for you to share something that you told me earlier today about the upcoming webinars, because those might be of interest.
So, yeah, so there are a series of webinars that will continue on this one. The embassy has accepted to promote a series of webinars on the roadmap that I presented briefly, and so I couldn't show you in a few minutes what the various three steps in details, but those upcoming webinars will go into details. So each step will be dedicated, and then we'll have people come in who actually put that step in place and were successful in doing this and sharing their perspective. So this is what will continue this discussion if your members are interested in joining and continuing this conversation.
Is the best way to find a link to those on your website, or where would be the best way to find
So right now, I put it on the website. It's on frenchculture.org, but also, and I can type this here, and it's also on Facebook, and then I will promote this on a number of places. But this is coming up. The first one is April 28th, and then every 2 weeks we'll be having one of those.
Great. Will be a particularly useful resource. Thank you. And thank you for your time and sharing the insights from Bilingual Revolution and more. It's so great to have you as an advocate, both in New York City and
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy we were able to do this together. It's we need to be together and talk about the things we care about.
And here's to future cooperation, either during this coronavirus or after.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us from around the U.S. and the world. Really appreciate it. And you can find Fabrice's contact online and in the chat room. You can reach him there if you want to follow up. So thank you.
It's good to see you. It's good to see you, Valerie and Carol. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Hey, Carol.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Ouais, bisous. Thank you for the invitation. Bye.
Kara, thank you.
Thanks, Carol.